thank you. Right, well, we'll get started. Effectively, this is the first time I've been on a FEM thing for a couple of months, because Claire's been hosting, and I know Ali, my business practice manager, has also hosted a session. So it's really nice to be back. And today I'm joined by Cheryl Frazer from Ovation, and we're going to talk about her return to work and how she's juggling that with having a young baby, young child, and yeah, a little bit more about what she's doing on a return to work, and maybe some skills that she's thought of that we can apply if we're finding ourselves in that same position. So thank you, Cheryl, for joining me.
Welcome. Happy to be here.
I'll just give you a little bit of bio from her bio about Cheryl. She's the practice manager at Bristol-based Ovation Finance, and her career started off working for a platform before moving into paraplanning and subsequently into her current role, which is practice manager. And she's responsible for people management, business management, and compliance at Ovation. She's qualified in advice, business coaching, and in 2022, she won the Women in Finance Awards for the Team Leader of the Year award. And in 2023, she had her first child and made the transition back into work in January this year. So, Cheryl, we're going to do a Q&A style thing today, and I've posed some questions. I know you said you've thought about those a little bit, so I'm sure everyone's looking forward to hearing some of your experiences. So thanks for being willing to share.
No problem, Cheryl, no problem.
So do you want to tell us a little bit firstly about your role and Ovation for people who maybe not aware of Ovation?
Yeah, sure. So Ovation, so we're, like you said, Bristol-based financial planners, very much focus on holistic planning and financial well-being. So our motto really is about making being happier, not just wealthier. So it's how you can use what you've got to kind of meet what you want to do in life, but realistic expectations. You're not going to come to be like, oh yeah, now you can retire in 2 years with a yacht. Like, it's what do you have, what can we do, what do you want to do, and let's get you there. So it's very much not just about let's make your money grow as much as you can, but how do you want to use your money? How can we help you get there? That sort of thing. Myself, like you said, I'm practice manager, so it's quite a varied role, I would say. So like you said, I'm compliance manager, so I look after day-to-day compliance, help out the compliance officer, research and implement any FCA projects, complete returns, that sort of thing. I look after people and HR. So apart from the directors, I'm sort of everyone's line manager. People report to me. I sort out HR in the company. I do have the assistance of an HR consultant, because I'm not going to pretend I'm an expert in the field. It's not my area, but I do have that support there. Training and development, so I do quarterly reviews, help people set objectives, look at courses, help out, get people onto exams, progress to where they want to get to, really. Bit of operations, so kind of the business management, sorting out contracts with suppliers, keeping the business running in the background. I think it's fair to say I'm not the advisor in the face, but I'm kind of the one in the background keeping it all running. So that includes IT, sorting out software, cybersecurity, all that sort of stuff. So kind of a bit of a jack of all trades, I think it's fair to say the role is.
Yes, there's multiple hats to be worn in that role, Cheryl.
Yeah. I think it's a fair way to put it, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So, you know, as I said in the introduction, in the last sort of 18 months, you've had a baby, taken parental leave and returned to Ovation. So can you share with us like any the planning you needed to do around your job prior to going on leave and then having your baby? So things you had to do before you went on leave to kind of prep and make yourself feel a bit more in control.
Yeah, so a bit of a tricky one, if I'm being honest, because like I kind of just went over, I've got many hats, so really trying to figure out what on earth I'm going to do with all of them. It wasn't as simple as, you know, we need to get in a fixed term advisor to come in and just take over, or a paraplanner administrator. It was trying to figure out what's going to happen with all these bits. So, I mean, some of it was the way I went on mat leave. I went off at the very beginning of March and was due to return January. So it always bookended the year quite nicely. So a lot of stuff I tried to get done before I went. So those first sort of 2 months of the year, I got as much compliance done as I could. So all the like due diligence, policy reviews, getting our application sorted for PI, sort of any templates sort of pre-filled, to as much done as possible. But what I ended up doing was actually sharing a lot of responsibilities out amongst the whole team, which turned out to be quite a good thing, because it made me sort of have to get policies written down to kind of get out of my head and get it onto paper. So it was very much kind of trying to look, all right, well, who in the team would be best suited to maybe do this, who would like to actually maybe learn a bit more and do this. So it was a good opportunity to get people involved in other areas as well. So it was very much trying to map out, what do I do, who could do it, who would like to do it, make sure that they're trained in it, there's policy in place, but things as well, such as like setting up diary reminders. So this needs to be done by this time, even things down to, you know, putting in everyone's diary at the beginning of every month, a reminder to go do the monthly technical assessment and things like that. So it wasn't the simplest one to kind of be like, right, I'll just get someone in to cover, because it's such a broad area of what I do. So it was very much trying to like, what can I get done before I go for the year? Because it sort of, like I said, it bookended it nicely, but also trying to share it out and train people up and even hand over some responsibility. Because since I've come back, I've not taken everything back. It was a chance to kind of be like, right, who would like to do some more of this stuff? Here you go.
And that's quite interesting, isn't it? So sort of by delegating, you manage to permanently delegate.
Permanently delegated, yeah.
I like this, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was quite good, actually. I knew there was some stuff that it was almost a chance actually as well to go like, right, what would be a good area for someone to take on and then keep? So it was almost a good way to kind of see some areas for responsibilities for people to also to help with their development as well.
Yes, that's really interesting, because I think that then what I feel like you're saying is that because of your role and also your responsibility in the business, and it feels like, you know, even if you were running your own business as well, you're going to have a lot of different hats that you have to, you know, and then how are you going to try and either find someone to outsource that to or delegate to someone else? It's really interesting. I think I might come back to it if it's okay. I'm quite interested right at the end to talk about, especially for advisors, how we might think they might be able to apply a similar thing to their role. Because as you say, I think with an administration role, maybe you can just bring someone into, you know, short term cover, and maybe even with paraplanning you can look at outsourcing for a short period when you've got parental leave, but with an advisor role I think that's definitely more challenging, so I'd like to revisit that maybe at the end if we can.
Yeah, sure.
Your thoughts on that. So my next question was, did you have a lot of contact with work while you were on leave?
So mixed, I'd say. So we have a sort of team WhatsApp, a bit more social. So I sort of dip into that a bit while I was off. I did pop in a few times the office. I'd, you know, bring my beautiful boy in to say hello, meet everyone, sort of thing. I'd have a bit of a chat then, but it was very much you're on maternity leave, we're not going to talk to you about anything, just come in and say hello, but no work. But very un-HR-y. I didn't actually plan any keep in touch days, which I know isn't very HR, I will say that. But I think possibly due to the nature of my role and the relationship I have, I was quite relaxed about it. Like, that if something big pops up, you can contact me. But we did just kind of keep it very open. You know, they didn't. It was very much, no, we're not going to contact you. See you in, you know, see you at the end. But the door was always open if I needed to pop in and have a chat about anything. So the only, I'd say, formal chat I had was when I came in to talk about my return to work. So I guess because I work for a small firm, the door was always open, like if I needed to reach out to them. But hadn't really put anything formal in place, possibly because of my role and the nature of it, whereas really should have keeping in touch days, because legally an employer shouldn't be just sort of contacting you out the blue for stuff. You do need to have those in place. But I think because of I look after HR and stuff, I was like, no, I'm quite happy with that. But that's not to say that that's what it should be for people by any means at all.
I think also the size, knowing Ovation and the size of the firm has a slightly different impact as well, doesn't it, on that? Because you know, and your role with the other directors and your position in the firm. I think, you know, those keeping in touch days are going to be vital if you're not in that kind of more senior role. And you know, as you say, HR wise, you need to make sure those are all being kind of followed properly.
Yeah, definitely. And then, like I said, the formal chat I had when I came back was when I arranged, you know, I brought my boy with me to say hello to everyone, but then we also turned into a bit more of a formal chat of like, okay, do I want to return when I said I was going to return? And how is that going to return look like, and what am I looking for? And that's the formal chat we then had before I then did return to work.
So knowing some of the people, you know, pretty well in Ovation, I think that I was really interested, and I hope that you'll be all right. But were you the first person in, like, or were you weren't the first person, I know you weren't the first person, but the first woman in the business to take off time to have like a long period of time off?
Yeah, definitely. So like you mentioned, we have had someone who's taken paternity leave. So that was the 2 weeks. But no, I'm the first woman at Ovation to get pregnant while at Ovation and then go through the long maternity leave process.
And how was it to navigate that kind of conversation about how long you wanted off, and how you were going to deal, you know, with all those responsibilities you have?
Yeah, so navigating it was interesting. So because I was the first person, you know, there's the bit in the handbook, but actually having the process in place wasn't there because it hadn't needed to be. So it was quite helpful in a way that it was me who was pregnant, because I would look after the process. So it was quite helpful to go through it on myself, weirdly. But I did have the help of our HR consultant to guide me through it. And being honest, I was surprised. It really wasn't actually that complicated. You know, there's a bit of paperwork to do, but I think it's very much how your employer is willing to help you in that transition and back, if I'm being honest about it. So, you know, navigating through that, I've been very lucky in that the company I work for, it does practice what it preaches, in that it looks after its employees. So when kind of going through that and making a lot of the decisions, it was very much in my best interest and what will work for me, and how will the kind of company fit around that to help me through it. Because being honest, my pregnancy, I did not glow. I was not one of these women who glowed and it was easy by any means. You know, I think I told my MD that I was pregnant at, when did I tell him? It was, I think, at like 9 weeks. I was so ill. I was just so struggling to function. I need to have a nap at least once a day to just get through it right now. And, you know, all the way through, I was really well supported in what I needed and making sure that I was okay. And it made creating that and navigating through that point to get to maternity leave a lot easier. But I appreciate I am in a fortunate position where I am in a company where I could talk about it and they would work around me and help with that.
And do you think there was yeah, I'm interested to know, because I think even in a really supportive environment, you know, I've had discussions with people where things don't always go the way that you necessarily want them, just because of the way that sometimes business has to happen. So you know, I guess is there anything at any point that you felt actually, you know, and maybe not in your position, but that, you know, you thought about that policy that you've now got in place, that you thought, we need to make sure we've got these things like really clear for like the next person that's coming through this, that you could, you know, that you think would be of advantage for people to kind of just be aware of, or things that maybe, yeah, weren't, you know, you hadn't officially thought about in a policy, but actually now it's there, and it's important that we're all aware of it, and maybe people who are listening will need to think, oh, is that in our policy, or do I know our policy? Like, do I know that all those things will be mentioned?
Yeah, I think some things, I mean, the almost minor things that you might not think of, like what happens to annual leave? What are you entitled to? What do you get? How can you carry it over? What can I carry over? You know, how will that impact my return to work with using leave? So I think that's possibly one of the ones. I guess as well, it's I wouldn't say there was too much. I would say I think the main thing is possibly knowing what you want. Because what I found, it's and also like as a employer, if I know what someone wants, it's so much easier to work around things and plan around it. You know, I think as well, something that it's important to know as well is having the flexibility, and when an employer needs to know about what you actually want to do. You know, going into maternity leave, you might have a plan, but it's nice to have an idea of what you think your return might look like, but it's not set in stone. So it's making sure that we know that when touch points are booked in, there are certain times like kind of need to know the plan by this point so that we can plan around it. It's not necessary to be like, I need to know just because I need a decision whether I can say yes or no. It's more giving time to then plan around it, I think is something that sort of came to light a little bit. I would say, you know, and it's very much from our perspective to work around, you know, the mother returning, so that there isn't any pressure on having to do it a certain way. It's so that if we know what's going to happen, can plan around it, whereas when it's possibly a bit last minute, it's a little bit harder to figure things out.
And interestingly, you said that you went on maternity leave in March, you said, didn't you? And then you came back for like January. So you kind of had Christmas and then came back. Was that you thought, well, that works conveniently for our year end, for a year end? Or was it, I know I want 10 months? Like, I'm really interested, because so many people are either like, oh, it's a short thing, or it's 12 months, or, you know, like, I'm quite interested how you settled on that.
So the year end is like purely coincidence, if I'm being honest. I mean, I did use leave to just push it through. So I'm not going to come back like a few days before Christmas. Let's just push it to the year end. So I did the 9 months. To be quite honest, the reason I didn't do 12 months, the last 3 months you don't get any pay. And you know, unfortunately, we do have an enhanced policy, but you do then go on to statutory, and then there's no pay. And you know, I appreciate not everyone's in this position, but it can be quite brutal going on to statutory suddenly. You know, especially when women contribute to the household as well. And then the idea of going on to no pay was like, I just can't survive on that.
Yeah, so it was financially driven.
Yeah, especially you know, because as you know, I say this purely from a personal perspective. You know, as little ones growing, we want to be able to start going and doing a bit more, and things will cost, you know, and starting to get him settled into nursery, that's not cheap. So it was very much just want to start getting paid again, to be quite honest. That's why I didn't take the 12 months.
So when you started talking about those discussions, you know, even though you didn't have your keeping in touch day, you just, you know, so in principle, this is what I'm thinking. And then as it went through, still occasional, yeah, this is still what I'm thinking. And then a conversation, you know, so you said to me just before we came on and started recording that you're working for 4 days.
Yeah.
So was that 4 days kind of in your mind before? Because you know, that's what you felt like financially and also practically for your job was best, or was that something that kind of came out through, you know, once you've had your little boy?
So I knew I would drop at least a day. I knew that. So the way I work at the moment, I do 4 days, but just for kind of thing, I do work a little bit weirdly, like in the office on a Monday. So I work like a longer day on a Monday, but then finish early those other 3 days. I'm still doing 4 days, but I finish early, so I finish at 3:30, so I can go get my little one, and we have a nice afternoon, late afternoon as such together. How that happened, I will be honest, I wasn't sure at the beginning. Kind of knew what I might like to do, but there are kind of a few factors. One being nursery, the times they offer, how much it costs. Like, is it more cost efficient if I just do like, let's say I did 5 days, but 2 of those are mornings and I have the afternoon. Actually, it was like, well, it doesn't work out better, and I might prefer to have the whole day instead than kind of rushing for a morning and going and getting. So I'll be honest, a lot of it was factored around childcare. Where me and my husband are, we don't have any family around us, so we can't use them for help. So it's very much what nursery can offer. So I'll be honest, it is juggling like, well, we did this, you know, does it work? Is it more cost efficient to do like some half days or a full day, or how best to do it? And also a little bit of, you know, what would be nicer for me. I think I want to have like the full day. But a lot of it is based around trying to navigate childcare, being honest.
Yeah, I think there's an awful lot of people though now who are hopefully, and I hope a lot of businesses as well, and I hope that more women are getting to choose to work for businesses like it, where we can say, well, I'm going to work a long day. I've heard more and more people like, one of my days is my long day. So I'm always going to be there at least once a week, where I can be there later on when you need to talk to me, or if something's booked for later on, or if we've got to have a team meeting, I'm always going to be kind of around for at least one of those days, and then have slightly shorter days on others. I think flexibility is just so important. And I think if anyone listening is working for someone who is unable to, or at least not willing to discuss that flexibility, I think that my view on that business would be they need to get with what's going on in society. But it was also really important to recognise that your role as well requires a certain amount of it's not really a role that could be consolidated without a lot of effort on your part of working, say, long 3 days to have 2 days, or it's not really that type of role, is it? There's so much, as you say, that you're doing.
No, definitely. And even, I'll be honest, even cutting down to 4, one of the challenges I felt with returning is changing my mindset to being part-time. Something that I'm gonna say I'm slowly getting better at. I'm still working on it because I do still struggle with it, but come back and like, yep, so I've got this, I have it done by then, but actually I'm not gonna have it done by then. It's thinking you can still do the same thing in the same time as if you were full-time, and practically that's just not possible. And I will say it's been quite the challenge for me, is trying to be a bit more realistic with stuff. And especially, like you said, my type of role, I think if I went down to 3 days, I wouldn't be able to do it all. And that's just that is what it is. It just wouldn't happen. We'd have to sort of look at resourcing on that part.
So do you think that it's gone as you planned, or do you think there's been things that you were like, oh, I could have thought about that a bit better?
Me being off,
or they could have thought about that a bit better. Yeah, of like you getting back to work.
So I think getting back to work. So I think when I was off, we probably should have got someone to at least do one aspect of what I do. I think that the kind of view on it was, as in it was, we tried our best, but I think there were some bits that it would have been helpful to have a bit of extra resource on just one area. Coming back in, I mean, I'll be honest, when I came back, it's a weird thing. It felt weirdly normal. And I say weirdly because, you know, I've been off for 10 months and my entire life has just changed. You know, I now have my beautiful boy who's like everything. You know, I'm responsible for a human now. And then I'm suddenly back into work, you know, I'm there sat doing meetings and I'm just like, well, this feels very, very familiar, but everything has changed. It's totally changed, but it's just like, oh, right, here we go, back again. Like I was never off. And it for me personally, it was the most bizarre feeling that I'm kind of sat back at my desk. My entire life has changed, but I just sat in the same meeting like, well, this is exactly the same way I left. It's the most bizarre thing. But I mean, work-wise, you know, I'm fortunate I have had a really just smooth transition back in. You know, I do have a busy role, but I personally enjoy that. So I think the first week I kind of eased back in, I was just straight back into it then. But that's for me personally how I prefer it. And I've almost just kind of, from a work perspective, just got straight back into it.
Yeah.
It's for me personally, I'm not saying the personal part, but the work part was just straight back in, like, okay, let's crack on.
Yeah, I imagine the personal part is actually the harder part, especially if you've got if you enjoy where you work and you're surrounded by good people, then hopefully you can just sort of get back into it. But that doesn't mean that you've not got a massive amount of other personal stuff that you're trying to get your head round of mum guilt and various other things.
Yeah, no, I mean, for me, the return to work, the hardest thing was the anxiety and the mum guilt. I mean, leading up to it, you know, being honest about my kind of experience, I had awful anxiety and mum guilt, not about the job or where I work or could I still do my job. It was like, oh, you know, is my boy into nursery? Is he going to be okay? Is he going to miss mummy? Am I awful? What am I doing? And like the mum guilt is unreal. It really, really is. I mean, even like when I was doing a settling in sessions, like an hour, just an hour. You know, I drop him off, I get in the car and I cry. I'm like, oh, he's going to wait for me for an hour. Like, what am I doing? And you know, it's really hard. You know, you speak to you like, oh, they're going to love nursery. They're going to love nursery, and you know they will. But until you actually do it, it's. I think a way to kind of describe it is, you know, you see these people who go and like jump off rocks and cliffs into the sea, and they're doing it. They're fine. They're safe. They love it. I'm like, you go do it. You'll love it. You'll be fine. And you know you'll be fine. And you'll probably, well, maybe enjoy it. But until you actually jump off, you're not going to be okay. And it's a weird thing. Like, you know, I mean, you know, he's fine now. He absolutely loves it. You know, I see pictures. He's always happy, and he comes home covered in, you know, God knows what. To be honest, like absolutely loving life. But until you get to that point, so everyone can tell you they're going to love it, but you're still not going to feel, you're going to have that anxiety and that guilt. And you know, it's not something that goes away overnight by any means. I mean, you know, to begin with, my little boy did Monday, Tuesday, yeah, he does Monday, Tuesday, Thursday and Friday morning, and we thought Friday afternoon we'll just make it work. I can't like do it all straight away. It's too much mum guilt. And it's only, and you know, where he's got a bit older, it used to be fine because he'd nap most of the afternoon, then we just have like an hour and a half to kind of get through. But now he's a bit older, he doesn't nap as long, and he's much more active and wants that more attention. It's impossible to work at the same time. So he now does a full day, up till 3:30 in nursery. And we only made that change a couple of weeks ago. And even though I've been back 5 months, even just adding on that extra half a day, for which he's asleep for half, but anyway, the like mum guilt just doing that was unbelievable. And you think, you know, I've been back for 5 days, just nursery. You'd think, no, it's the right decision. But even trying to do that, like the mum guilt is something else. It really is.
Oh dear. Yeah, I don't think I listen, I didn't have children, but I think if you spoke to many people who have children, a lot older children, it probably, to be honest, takes a long time for that to go away, some kind of guilt factor. Okay, so let's try and think about a few kind of practical things, I guess. I do want to just like touch quickly on, you know, if we're in like, what's your view of you know, we're a woman, we're in an advisor role, we're a client facing role where we've cared for these clients, and we're really, really, you know, passionate about making sure that we ensure that whilst we're off, that service, you know, is as succinct as and continuing as possible. You know, what kind of tips do you think that you would be able to share, maybe if there are an advisor thinking, I'm going to go off, and to be honest, I do want to take my 9 months, or I do want to take whatever amount it is, not just a few months, not just 3 months, you know, I do want a really good chunk of time off, how they can start to think about their role and what they could maybe put in place to kind of see them through that period.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my first would be like, what's the resource available in the team? You know, how many clients do you have? How many clients do your fellow advisors in the company have? Is there resource to maybe share them out, just so that you know how your colleagues work, you know that they're the same sort of mindsets as you, they're up to date on how your company does stuff. Is there scope for them to kind of share out your clients, so that one, you can easily do sort of handover, like gentle handovers, you know, like, you know, I got maternity leave, my colleague is going to look after if you need anything. So whether, like, yeah, the clients can kind of stay with advisors who are already there, and they can just kind of absorb them for that period of time, because hopefully in that time, you know, it'll only be seeing them, you know, you've got might have to cover the review and maybe any additional questions, but hopefully you think it might not be too much. So that would kind of be my first area to look at, is like, right, how many clients do you have? Can they be absorbed by the team to then pass back to you when you come back? You know, if that's not possible, I guess it depends if you have any sort of locum agreements with someone who could maybe just step in.
I think it is going to be probably, isn't it, Cheryl? It's going to be really dependent on the position. So
yeah.
if you are in a team like you've been in, and there's possible that other advisors can assist, then I think maybe you'll do as many of your reviews as possible, a bit like you did with all your compliance stuff before you actually go on maternity.
Yeah, definitely.
You get yourself all in a row, and then it's really only going to be like emergency stuff, isn't it? Or things when there's a withdrawal, or things that are unexpected that are going to come up and be able to, like, you know, your team will be able to help with that. But I think that's what I hear quite often, especially for women who are like maybe sole traders or working on their own, is that they want, you know, they're having a baby, they want this time off, they literally can't, like, there's no support at all. So they're like, well, I won't be available for 4 weeks, but after that I'll answer my emails, or I'll always be on email. Or I think we need to maybe pull back from that a bit. You know, is that, like you said, everyone's meant to have a locum, whether you're self-employed or not. You know, is your locum someone who you really, really trust?
Yeah.
Is your locum someone who would be able to understand your business well enough? I think would be my thing. You know, if someone approached me and said, listen, I'm self-employed, but I want 6 months off, you know, if I could tell you enough about, you know, my business and stuff like that, would you be my locum? I think my team and I would be quite open to doing that for someone. And I think maybe that's what's coming out for me today, is if you're in a team, you can probably sort it out. But if you're not, how are you going to navigate that? And do you know enough people, or is the groups that you can say, I need someone to be able to just take the pressure off me for, you know, it might not be able to be 9 months, but it might be able to be 6 months, or what, you know.
Definitely. I think having some sort of backup support somewhere would be vital.
Because also then it means that even if I didn't know the answer, I'm using me as an example, but please let's not have loads of people asking me to be their maternity cover locum. But If it was me, it would at least be then, well, we could field the call, and field the
Mm.
email. And even if we still had to contact, as you said, you were there if they needed you in kind of an emergency. And when you're
Yeah.
running a self-employed business of your own, you probably always need to be there, still there. But maybe if it's not directly accessible by clients, more like by someone else saying, I can't really navigate this for you.
Yeah.
What should we do for this client? I wonder whether that's kind of a solution as well.
Yeah, I mean, something like that, almost like that halfway house, isn't it? As in someone to just field things, I say simple requests that you would be comfortable handling, that you probably, you've already had that handover. But like you said, if there's an emergency or something big, you've got that contact to be like, just need your help just to get this bit sorted. How
Yeah.
would you like to proceed? So I guess there's that peace of mind that your clients are being looked after and handled, but you will be kept in the loop if you need to be as well.
Yeah, definitely. Kerry on the chat has just said her boys are 20 and 23 and her guilt has now gone. Her guilt was now gone. I don't know if it took her till they were 20 to 23. But have you ever thought about how mums who don't work feel? My friend has a real complex about trying to encourage, in particular, her daughters through education and to do well. She feels guilty she hasn't set a work example. But I was an advisor when I was on mat leave, and my colleagues covered. Yeah, I think if you're in a good firm, you're maybe in a bigger firm, or even in a small medium firm like Cheryl and I are in. I think that kind of thing could be done quite easily. Really interesting about the mum guilt and the complex, and if you don't return to work. I grew up in a family where my mum didn't work for a long time, and I don't know. I've never asked her if she felt any kind of guilt. Maybe I'll talk to her about that. She went back to work when I was about 14. But yeah, it's a strange one. I don't know that I always felt that she was very encouraging, and she's quite confident, and I don't think that I ever thought, oh well, she doesn't work, so it wasn't necessarily a good example, because I also got a lot of advantages from having my mum not work at that time. And let's face it, that generation was a little bit easier than where we're at now.
Mm.
Yeah,
I
it's an
think
interesting one.
I think it's possibly a bit of reflection on the kind of the world we live in today. I think whether you choose to stay at home, whether you choose to go back to work, what I found is there's so much sort of society pressure and influence, and whichever way kind of go, there'll be someone saying, no, you're doing it wrong, or you've gone back to work, you shouldn't be going back to work, why are you staying at home, do you not love your child enough? But then if you just say, it's like, oh well, you're not setting a good example, why are you doing this, you're not, and I think nowadays a lot of times sadly, in a way, mums can't win in some aspect. You do it one way, someone will tell you, no, you're doing wrong, you're doing the way, someone else will say you're doing it wrong. And it's honestly something that I've been through and learned is kind of screw what everyone else thinks. You just do what's best for you. Ultimately, you know what's best for you and your family. Be happy. Do what you need to do.
Yeah, and block out the noise a bit, isn't it? We use that so much, and with social media now, like, and there's so much, like, especially on Instagram, like, as I say, I'm not a mum, so I don't follow loads of like mum accounts, or like, but I have quite a few. My sister is a mum of young children, and the kind of pressure that is like about this perfect world that you can have with 2 young children and also a career is completely crazy. Like, that's like, no one's life is that perfect.
Yeah, and I think in your mate talk, Rebecca, you could touch on it, it's about, just be kind to yourself, and you don't put that pressure on yourself to be able to do everything. It's a lot, and it's okay not to do everything. It's okay, realistically, if you take away, the social media and what you think everyone wants, actually, if you ask just, a normal person down the street, no one would expect you to be doing everything. You do what works for you, and that's okay. And I think we need to be okay with that. And ignore all those pressures and like, oh, you should be doing this, should be doing this. Oh no, you shouldn't. You do what you need to do. Do what you need to do, what works best for you and your family. And that's all your family will need. That's all your kid will need,
Yeah,
you know, and it's being
absolutely.
okay with it.
Yeah. So just to round off, because we're probably just about to finish, I want we've kind of touched on it, but my final question was around: have you got any tips for people if they're starting, right, they've decided they want to start a family, or they are already pregnant, or but they haven't yet told their employer, and their employer isn't expecting it, because some people we are expecting, and we've kind of maybe already had discussions about what that might look like depending on what role we're in, but the reality is that if one of my team, of young team that I've got, came to me and said, I'm pregnant, and we wouldn't have planned that. We have not planned that. We don't know that anyone's going to do that. So what's the kind of, what's top tips for someone who's going to approach you, Cheryl or me, and say, I'm pregnant, and I this is it. But yeah, tips as to like what they might want to think about before, so that they can go in kind of like, right, this is happening, and this is what I'm thinking. What are your tips?
Yeah, I think I think maybe sort of two aspects to it. If you're in a place where you have the support of your employer and you like your employer, be honest about what you want. Be honest, you have every right to start a family and take what you are legally entitled to have with regards to paid and then the unpaid part of parental leave. So you are fully in your right to have everything that is laid out to you. So that, please don't ever feel that's like a concern, you're asking for it. No, you are entitled to this. I think from as an employer perspective, just be honest about what you want. For me, love to support whoever wants to go through that journey, but it's a lot easier to manage it if I know what you want. Even if you don't know exactly what you want right now or what it's going to be in the future, but just in the immediate, what do you need? What do you think you might want? How do you think you might like to slow down to move into maternity leave? Roughly what you might like to look at when coming back. But again, the return is not to be set in stone, because that would change throughout maternity leave, but it's just getting a bit of an idea so that in the background as an employer, I can start to make plans around it. So all I would say maybe is be honest about what you want, because then it's a lot easier to work with someone if you kind of know what they might need. And like I said, it's not that, oh, I'm 12 weeks pregnant, I'm going to tell my employer this is everything I want. No means saying that at all. It's just to start planning. But what I would say is, maybe if you're nervous about it and you're not sure how your employer will take it, make sure all your rights and what you're entitled to. Flexible working rules changed in April. There was a big change. The main thing was that when you propose your return to work, you no longer have to put a business feed forward and justify that how your new working pattern won't impact the business. That's now on the of the company, which is a massive change. It's going to help mothers so much in helping them, to return to work if that's what they want to do. It's really stopping that barrier. I'd say, there's a lot of resources online to look at. And whilst we've said about social media, but there is also, there are some stuff where you have to pay for, but if you look at their social media, you get little snippets of like tips and stuff to help. If you work for a big firm, please do consult with HR, because the big firm, it is a bit more impartial. But I would say, talk to friends who've been through it, and as well see how, because honestly, everyone I've spoken to has a different experience, and it's good to just get various sort of feedback on how things went to different requests. And reach out to me, like, if anyone after this is like worried, please feel free to like reach out to me if you want to have a chat about it and know like what you're entitled to, or any tips, or what
Definitely.
you're thinking of doing. 100%.
I think so. I mean, I think, the reality is that if you don't have a great working environment, or maybe you're wanting to think about it and you're unsure about questions, and there is one question come in which I'll read out in a minute, and we'll talk to Emma in a minute. But I think, your backup is know your HR. You can speak to HR, but also if you're concerned about it being in-house, you know, there are so many other resources, you know, that are available, ACAS, all of the stuff like that, that you can just get some really, really good advice. And I'm no doubt, as you say, that social media has lots of
It does have good stuff on
yeah,
it. I'm not slating
yeah.
it.
I think, yeah, you know, this is why groups like this, conversations like this are so important, because I'm sure that there are plenty of people that even if I couldn't help, Cheryl couldn't help, we can advise people that can help. But Emma has said that she recently transitioned from paraplanner to planner, did not receive an increase to reflect that. I might say, Emma, we've probably got, I'll query that anyway. But when I brought it up, I was told that because they are not setting any metrics, they would not look to increase my salary until I'm back from maternity leave. Would you say this is acceptable or something I should challenge?
So me personally, if you've moved into a new role and taken on more responsibilities, it's kind of irrelevant if you're going on maternity leave or not.
I agree. I think, I know, and that's why I was like, why didn't they give you a salary increase to start off with? But I think it was, as Emma says, she has brought it up, and Emma and I have spoken multiple times about just sort of the complexities of working for people where you don't feel that you're getting necessarily a fair deal. But she said when I brought it up, I was told it was because they are not setting any metrics, presumably because you're going on maternity leave, Emma. I don't know if you can clarify that. And therefore they wouldn't look to increase it. Yeah, because so basically they're not going to set metrics until she gets back from maternity leave. So therefore, almost like whatever metrics they would set, which presumably are target driven, would then be put in place and therefore justify a salary increase. I mean, Cheryl, my gut is that I would go back and challenge it. I would also benchmark myself. Be very aware of what your capabilities are, Emma. Benchmark yourself and say, it doesn't really matter whether I've got, you know, why aren't you setting me metrics? You know, like I could still have metrics now. I'm happy to have metrics. You know, I guess it depends how you're feeling about that, but I don't see why it has to all wait, because that, if anything, is putting doubt in your mind, which is a shame, Emma, because I know that I think that I'm right, that, you know, my general vibe about it is that you've been really happy with where you've moved to. So it's disappointing, I guess, if we've got a situation now where you're feeling a little bit, you know, that's feeling a bit uncomfortable.
And I definitely say, you know, if they've moved you into a role of a planner, then you should be fairly remunerated for that. It's irrelevant if you've got metrics or targets or whatever. Difference is you're now in a new role. That's almost like a contractual change, to be honest. So it shouldn't be relevant on whether you're going on maternity or not.
And you do take on more responsibility because you are, you know, let's face it, just on the FCA, even if you're just on the FCA register, it means you're taking on more responsibility. It means that a complaint could be raised. All of these things, you know, you've got to keep up with your absolutely nail, your CPD, you know, all of those things that they have to measure for you, Emma, let alone whether the money from the kind of like metrics that they might set about targets. There is so much more responsibility that you have to make sure you're doing. So that would be, that would be my kind of view on it. But I would benchmark yourself too, because what they could do is they could then just benchmark it and go, well, we were overpaying you for what we were doing then, and actually this So there's a bit of, especially if they're being a bit funny about it.
Yeah, definitely. No, I would challenge it because it's a contractual change. It's irrelevant whether you're on going on maternity leave or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm not sure if we've got any other questions. Please just like either put them in chat or like come on and say, hi, I've got a question. But I hope that it's been an interesting I think it's been a really interesting conversation, even if it just prompts us to think a bit broader about what's going on for women and you know, how we're going to try and, for me, like support that as well. Like, how are we going to go, right, well, maybe there's a gap here. I feel there's a gap for someone who's like entirely on their own, and I don't know that really is, you know.
Yeah, so one thing I do want to say, if anyone's listening and has, you know, wants to request access to it, if we were an employer, something that I went through, which we've now implemented into our handbook, is maternity coaching, which I hadn't heard of until I got pregnant and went through the process. But I got put in touch with a maternity coach who I had a session with before I went on maternity leave, while I was on maternity leave, and I've had 2 sessions since I've returned. And for me personally, I found it honestly a really invaluable thing to have, because it talks you through your mindset and your challenges through each stage, from that transition into maternity leave, when you're in maternity, trying to think about how you want to return, like how's it looking for you, and then how you're getting on now you're back, through the challenges you're facing and the mindset. And I honestly couldn't recommend it enough for like helping with that transition. And if you're looking at ways to support your expectant and returning mothers, honestly, a brilliant thing to do. I couldn't recommend it more.
A brilliant morning. We've seen some incredible...
Hang on, sorry, hang on a second. That's my computer. Wait. Sorry about that. So that was Amelia's voice from Next Gen Planners, definitely coming out of another speaker. Sorry about that. Yeah, that's amazing. I've never heard of it. So there we go. Is it something, is it like something we can Google, where there is like all other kind of coaches, I'll suddenly find lots of maternity coaches?
Oh, I'll be honest, you probably would. She came as a recommendation. Wonderful woman, Vicky Layton. So if anyone's interested, drop me a message and I'll send you her details. I imagine you can, it's probably something you could Google and research and find, but I'm more than happy to, if anyone wants the details of the coach we use, to put you in touch. I did mine all over Zoom, so it's not an in-person thing.
Yeah.
So it needed to be, so location doesn't really matter. But honestly, if you want some more support or want to give support to someone, it was a fantastic service. It really is.
Excellent. Well, Hayley has seconded that. Again about ACAS. She's referring pregnant then screwed for legal advice and guidance as well. And then she used maternity and return to work coaching. And it was a game changer. So that's a fantastic tip. Thank you very much. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. And I know, as Cheryl's already said, she'd be happy to accept or help if you want to reach out. And I'm always around as well if people need to DM me, or yeah, if you've got any questions. So and Hayley has said, so much so I am now one myself. Sorry, I missed that. She is now a maternity coach. So you could also contact Hayley Hubble, who is on the call. So make sure you connect with her if that would be of interest. So thank you, Hayley, for that. And maybe that's something we can talk about with Hayley at some point, and we will talk about it again. But yeah, thank you so much, Cheryl. Thank you everyone for joining us. And there is another session next month, but my mind has gone blank. So you'll have to check out your emails so that you know what the session is next month, or check out my LinkedIn. But there will be a session next month. All right. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thanks.